Welcome to Parenting GPS, navigating your parenting journey. You know, there are so many options when it comes to schools these days. In fact, my episode last week with Dr. Gina Riley was on the topic of unschooling. Most people have heard of homeschooling, especially since COVID and the shutdown, and most people are aware of the kinds of public schools, private schools, charter schools, parochial schools, and what we put in kind of the category of, normal in terms of what we hear about every day. But today we're going to share things with you about a micro school that you may not have ever heard about. And I'm going to introduce my guest to help me do that right now. Kaity Broadbent currently serves as Prenda's head of media and chief empowerment advocate. Since 2018, she's helped pioneer Prenda's, and we're going to tell you what Prenda is in just a minute, Prenda's unique micro school-based learning model and philosophy as head of learning. Prior to Prenda, she was a speech language pathologist, literacy coach, and mom to 4 spunky Prenda kids who love their micro schools. Adriane Thompson is a mom to 3 neurodivergent boys. Learning about their brains led her to share what she's learned through her blog, Raising Kids with Purpose. She is the executive assistant and media relations coordinator at Prenda. Her kids are all thriving in different education settings, such as a homeschool, a Montessori school, and a hybrid middle school. She's a certified conscious parenting coach and hopes to inspire parents to create lifelong connections with their children and enjoy the journey along the way. Together, Kaity and Adriane co-host a podcast called Kindled. They explore the art and science of creating empowering learning environments and family cultures. Each episode offers actionable insights to help parents and educators ignite their child's love of learning. Ladies, thank you so much for being with me today.
So nice to be here. Thanks for having us.
Thank you. And some of you may remember and may think that, oh, that one woman looks very familiar. Adriane Thompson was part of my show back in March with Amy Carney on family meetings. So check that out if you haven't seen that yet. So I would like to begin, Adriane and Kaity, for those people out there that have never heard of a micro school and are thinking, what in the heck is a micro school? I want to just put it out there. What is a micro school?
I had that same thought when I first came across the term. And so think of small school, micro schools. But there's so many different kinds of micro schools. So we'll kind of get into that too, of what Prenda signifies as a micro school, and then what you may stumble across wherever you live, and what a micro school, or sometimes they're called learning pods, may be. So basically, a micro school is where the class sizes are really small, is typically blended ages, or they're not just sticking to a specific grade, like within, the school. And then the curriculum is typically tailored to fit the needs of each class. So at Prenda, what we call a micro school is a school of 5 to 10 learners, and it's typically in someone's house, but it can be in a community space, like a church space. We've had some in dance studios. People can get really creative of where they have school. And so we kind of think of it too as like not necessarily being like a brick and mortar school. But I feel like before the pandemic, a micro school could even have been like 100 to 150 students. So it just basically means small school.
A small school. And as you said, it doesn't have to be in a building that we normally call a school. It could be anywhere. And so what is the difference to someone who's trying to figure all of this out? What are the differences between homeschooling, micro schools, and unschooling?
Yeah, that's a great question. So some of this is kind of like logistical, like where you go to school and how you go to school. And then there's kind of like a philosophical approach to learning type of approach. So I would say that homeschool is where the parent completely takes on the responsibility for educating their students. They do that at home. And you can use any type of
learning approach in your homeschool. You can have a very eclectic approach. You can use an unschooling philosophy in your homeschool. You can use a Montessori approach. There's lots of different approaches that you can apply as a homeschooler. So you'll find a lot of really unique, varied approaches that are wonderful, because something that we know about kids is that there are lots of different unique types of kids and types of learners. And that's why we need lots of different options so that we can meet the needs of each individual learner. So a micro school is kind of a different setting, right? Instead of having all of that on you as a homeschool mom or dad, you're going to partner with a micro school guide. A guide is someone who leads a micro school, and you're going to send your kids to them, but you're going to be a really active part of developing that child's individualized learning plan. You're going to help select that curriculum. You're going to be able to express to that guide your desires, your hopes for your child, your priorities, your family's values, so that you're really having a collaborative relationship with that guide. And then they will let you know what part of that child's learning they would like you to take on. So it's kind of like a hybrid version of a homeschool and a brick and mortar. You still send your kids. You're not completely responsible for all of that child's learning minutes, but you're still a big part of that process. And then with unschooling is an approach to learning that gives students a high degree of student autonomy or choice over what they do. There's very little instruction or like lesson planning that the adult does to administer an educational experience to the child. It's very collaborative, and the child is choosing into those opportunities based on their interests and passions. And we do a lot of that at Prenda. And I would say that a Prenda Micro School has a lot of that flavor of student choice and voice and a high degree of student autonomy, but it's going to come with a little bit more structure than a typical unschooling approach. So we're kind of a middle ground, if that makes sense.
So yes, so it sounds like a middle ground, not only in terms of the approach, in terms of structure, in size, well, it's a lot smaller than most schools, but so, it's really a continuum where maybe you have unschooling at one end and, a traditional school, over here somewhere, and maybe microschooling would be over here somewhere in between homeschooling and unschooling. Would you say that that's accurate?
Yeah, that's a really good description. And even from micro school to micro school, you'll find some Prenda micro school guides like to lead their classes with a little bit more structure, where they are doing a little bit more of that teaching in the traditional way. And some parents and some children really respond well to that. So you can kind of shop. It's like a micro school marketplace is kind of what we call it, where you can find that person that's going to run that micro school in a way that's going to work for your child. And because micro schools are so small, and that individual, that guide, is not dealing with hundreds of kids and hundreds of relationships, they're going to have a little bit more emotional availability to personalize and tailor that experience to your desires as a parent and what's working for that child. So we see lots of micro schools where some kids need more structure, and they're able to get that structure in the same classroom, whereas another student doesn't. And we don't need to take away their autonomy because another child needs more structure. Both are possible in the same space.
Excellent. And so let me ask you a question that I'm just going to pick this up here, that some parents out there might be asking, and I asked this of Dr. Riley when we talked about unschooling as well, is that you don't ignore the state and national standards in terms of what should be taught, correct?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I don't think a lot of parents, just in the general public, understand how our school system works. And all of those standards are actually tied to the student's funding. So if you are enrolled in a public school, that money comes with certain regulations and restrictions, which include these standards, which are really great things that all kids should probably know. So your relationship with those standards, how strict that is, really depends on how your student is enrolled. So with a micro school, if you're enrolled, in some states, our students are enrolled as homeschool students, where those standards aren't required, and in some states they are. And if you're enrolled with one of our partners, you're going to see a lot more rigor in that the tie to those standards, which is really important. And so our program is standards aligned, but you'll see a varying degree of flexibility in the application and interaction with those standards based on the student's enrollment type and the priorities of their family.
So I guess
what
the
sets
key,
us,
go
I'm
ahead,
sorry. I
Adriane.
think what sets us apart too is we're looking at growth. So instead of like in school, they're looking at grade level, and you know we want to make sure that they learn all this content in this year. Whereas when students come into a micro school, we go, okay, where are you? We do assessments, we kind of see where they are, and then we're looking at how much they're growing, not, oh, okay, this 6-year-old should be in first grade. So instead we're like, okay, where's a 6-year-old at? And then let's see how far they're able to grow. And so a lot of our students are growing a year and a half, 2 years, because that's what the focus is on, instead of making sure that they learn just that amount of content within whatever grade they're in, if that makes sense.
Great clarification. And so to sum that up, my sense is you're teaching the students where they are and what they need, as opposed to teaching the curriculum. You're teaching the student. So that's wonderful. And now that you've given us a bit of an overview about what a micro school is, we have lots of questions about what does it look like every day? What does assessment look like? What do real life experiences look like? And so what I'd like to do is take a break. And when we come back, we're going to really give parents an idea of what it might look like day by day, and then for the whole year. So thank you for giving us an overview, and we'll be right back. Okay, so now that we have an idea about an overview of a micro school, let's talk a little bit more about the philosophy of Prenda and a micro school. Would you share with us, please, what is the philosophy of Prenda and a micro school?
Sure. So we like to focus on 3 key elements. The first is cultivating connection, because we know from modern day neuroscience that brain development and learning is all based on whether or not there's enough psychological safety in that environment to help that child learn, right? So we want to make sure that they feel really secure in their relationships. Mm-hmm. And so then the second one would be prioritizing personalization. We don't want the kids to be seen as a group. Each member of that group is a unique individual, and we want to create enough emotional bandwidth in that guide or that micro school leader to be able to see each child as an individual. And research shows that once you get above about 10 kids, you have to kind of treat them like a herd of cats instead of unique individuals. So that's why we want to keep our class size is so low, and why we feel so passionate about microschooling as a solution to education. And then the third principle is honoring ownership. We want each child to feel like they have a significant amount of choice and voice and control over their learning experience. We want them to know that it matters what they think, what they're curious about, what they're passionate about, and that they're responsible for their learning. So those are kind of the 3 main drivers of our philosophy, I'd say.
And really everything you said aligns with what we know about learning and behavior and research. It's so powerful. And so well, first of all, would you share with our viewers, what does the word Prenda mean?
That's a great question. We get that question a lot, actually. So Prenda is a Portuguese word that means gift, but it also kind of sounds like the Spanish verb aprender, which means to learn. So to us, Prenda means that learning is a gift.
And you know, what a wonderful place all schools would be if every child felt that way, right? And so I just want to take a look here, because I don't want to miss anything. We talked a little bit about growth with Prenda. Let's talk about the numbers. How many children are involved in micro schools with Prenda, nationally, maybe globally, and what happened with all of that when we all went through the shutdown?
Yeah, so Prenda's been around for about 5 years. And since we started, we've helped over 1,000 people start micro schools, which means nearly 10,000 kids have gone through our program, which is incredible to think back. And so basically each year we typically run around 200 micro schools. And as you can imagine, when the whole world shut down, micro schools became a really popular thing because they were school in homes. I mean, my kids, that's We actually started my kids in a Prenda micro school 3 months before the pandemic happened. My husband thought we were kind of crazy. Like, what are we doing? We're pulling our kids out of school. They're going to go to school in a home. And then the pandemic happened. He's like, you're brilliant. The kids get to keep educating, keep going to school, because with our micro school, is only a few families. So it boomed. And from that, a lot of people, they thought it was a they were using it as a Band-Aid, but then a lot of people had that paradigm shift of school for their kids and decided to keep their kids in a micro school.
Excellent. And my guess is it's only going to continue to grow. Is my guess, just based on what I know. And so how does Prenda and the idea of micro schools, and we're going to talk about what a typical day might look like in a moment, but let's talk a little bit about the philosophy of real life experiences and the kind of learning that kids have when they're in a micro school setting.
Yeah, such a good question. I think that the underlying principle here is really purpose. Why are we learning, right? Because we don't know what careers are going to come, what the world's going to look like, right? We don't really know how to prepare for them for those careers because they don't even exist yet, right?
Exactly.
So we need to focus on foundational skills, and then your relationship with learning and your ability to learn and to figure things out.
Mm-hmm.
So we want each child to know why they're doing something. Why do you want to master 3rd grade math? Is it just so you can master 4th grade math, or is there some greater purpose? So as our kids are setting their own individualized, personalized goals every year, part of that process is that they have to clearly state a purpose behind that goal. And they see that every day. They're reminded, like, oh, someday I want to be a pilot, or I want to be an engineer. And a big part of this work is actually helping kids fall in love with problems that they see in the world. Does it bother you that not everyone in the world has clean water? That might be a really good intrinsic motivator to solve that problem. And if you want to go to a different country and help with that problem and maybe develop some wells or some technology that they don't have, you're going to need engineering skills. And if you back that up, you're going to need some math skills. And if you back that up, you're going to need some reading skills. So we're here doing all of these, basic education things in K-8 education, but it's with this greater purpose. So the drive that we see in these kids, when you match what they're doing day over day to a purpose that matters to them, is phenomenal.
Right. And my guess is you're not only saying you're going to need this then, but to apply it with the projects and things, as you said, that they're doing now,
Right.
to help them get to that point. And so learning is, again, it's based on interests. You're still looking at state and national standards, but you're really driving that passion and the interest of the child. And we also know that children don't all learn the same way. And, we mentioned at the beginning, Adriane, you talked about in your bio about 3 neurodivergent children, or that you have 3 children who have a label of neurodivergent, which really just means learning differently. And so, most traditional schools, and once again, I'm a former public school teacher. This is not a slam on public schools, but if we look at, I had Dr. Thomas Armstrong, the world expert of multiple intelligences, on the show last week. And this was what we talked about, is that most schools really offer the majority of what children are asked to do in 2 of the 8 ways that we know learning takes place in processing: verbal, linguistic, and logical mathematical. But when you have a smaller setting like a micro school or unschooling, like we talked about last week with Dr. Gina Riley 2 weeks ago, then you allow children to show you what they know the way they most can. Would you like to elaborate on that? What does that look like within a micro school through Prenda?
I think the biggest thing here is it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. And so we provide a ton of choices and, of course, guidelines. And so, like, what I think about is my 6-year-old, who last night he came home, and we haven't been talking about multiple intelligences for quite some time. And because we used to talk about like the smarts, and we all have different smarts. And it doesn't mean that, we're sticking you in a box of, oh, you only have these smarts, but it's important to know like our strengths and our weaknesses and how to build from those. And he comes home and he's like, Mom, he's like, do you think I'm music smart? And I said, yeah, I'm noticing you're picking up on the piano really fast. And he's like, but it's not just about learning instruments, Mom. I hear music everywhere. It was just so sweet. So I think it's so cool as we can take that and take these strengths that these kids have and go, okay, how can we learn math musically? How can we can, tap on the desk and count? Because I mean, he's 6, so he's still learning very
Right.
basic math skills. And so we can incorporate these different smarts that they have and help them learn in the best way that they can learn.
Absolutely. And you summed it up. It's about using their strengths. It's about helping them to develop things that they're not as strong in through their areas of strength. And that's what a gift to all of the kids. And so we've talked a little bit about the kind of curriculum, a little bit about standards, multiple intelligences. Can one of you share with us, what does an average day look like in terms of a place, in terms of time?
Yeah, totally. So our learning model has 4 segments of the day. We don't branch the day into topics like history or math time. We have 4 modes of learning. The first one is connect mode, which is all about relationship, building that culture around learning, building those relationships. And then we have conquer mode, which is where they're going to get those individualized mastery-based skills like math and reading and writing. Then they'll switch to what's called collaborate mode, where they're doing whole group experiences like Socratic discussions and debates. And then they'll switch to create mode, which is problem or project-based learning, where they're getting very hands-on and taking everything that they've learned in the other modes and applying it to the real world problems that they care about. So that's kind of what our day looks like. And then time-wise, typically it's a little bit scaled down from what you'd get at a typical traditional brick and mortar. We see most of our schools choosing a 4-day week, and then maybe like a 5-hour day. So it's 20 hours a week instead of, I don't know what you'd normally get in school, but a little bit scaled down. And we do that intentionally because a lot of our families want more time with their kids. They want to do more extracurriculars. They want to develop those other types of intelligences, and they can't when there's so much focus on so much time spent at school and then homework and all sorts of things like that. So it's scaled down intentionally.
So many opportunities that I can just think of in my brain when you're saying all of that. And tell us a little bit about cost. Does it cost to start a school with Prenda? How does that work in terms of the state and funding?
Yeah, so we do try to make it so that it doesn't cost parents anything. So we make it so we partner with these scholarship accounts or these scholarship programs in these states that are coming up, and for more school choice. And so, but there is a fee, like Prenda has a fee. It's $2,199 for the whole year for the program. And then the guide sets their fee so that they can get paid to teach the kids in their micro school.
Awesome. Well, I really encourage parents that are out there listening to check out your website and check out all of your social media. And we're going to talk about that at the end of the show, where people can find you if they have more interest. And, I just want to say again, because I was a public school teacher for a very long time. I did a show on unschooling last week. Today, we're talking about microschooling. I've talked about homeschooling. And we are not here to say this is the right way to do it, that there's only one right way. There's a huge continuum, and you have to look at your family situation, what works for you, what works for your child, and make it the best experience that they can possibly have in terms of their education. And so when we come back, we're going to take some questions from our viewers and then find out more about how people can get a hold of you. We'll be right back. This is the part of the show where we try to help parents reach their parenting goals, and I like to call it your parenting destination. And as I said, we have 2 questions today, and the first one is from Freddie L. from San Diego. And Freddie writes, I've been aware of the concept of microschools for a while. Do I have to be a certified teacher? And is there any kind of prepared materials and curriculum available, or would I have to start from scratch every day? And you already answered the first part of that.
Yeah, so there's no, Prenda does not hold any educational or certification requirement. However, some depends on the state. If you're accessing one of these scholarship programs coming online, I've seen in some of the laws get passed say that they do, some of them don't. So it's going to be a state by state thing, but Prenda does not hold that as a requirement. Some of our most amazing guides are just parents who stepped up to the plate and wanted to do this amazing thing for their kids, or people that were homeschooling and wanted to invite a few more friends in. I think something like 80% of our guides are just making it happen for their kids. It's amazing.
That's
then
yeah, very interesting. And speaking of that and the guides, our second question is a follow-up to that, and it's from Leslie B in New York City. And Leslie writes, I'm interested in starting a micro school with my children and a few other families, but I can't afford to do this voluntarily. Do guides get paid to run a micro school?
Yes, and Katie kind of touched on this already.
Right.
Is the guide sets a fee, and so there is a fee to Prenda, which the student pays, and then there's a fee that they pay the guide for them to make money while they are guiding a micro school.
Right. Absolutely. And so, believe it or not, we are almost out of time already. I would love to talk with you about this forever, because this is a passion near and dear to my heart, about children and helping them be the best that they can be, the way they can best be. And for people that want to find out more, Adriane and Kaity, where can they go? Through your website, social media, anything else, your podcast? What would you like people to know?
Sure. So Prenda.com, lots of information about the learning model and how to become a guide, and state specific information. And then you can follow us on social. We are at Prenda Learn. And then you can listen to the podcast with me and Adriane. It's called the Kindle Podcast. And you can find that at prenda.com/podcast.
And also you can access that just through your podcast app.
Yeah, it's everywhere.
Putting in Kindle, and I've listened to a few of them, and they're wonderful. And ladies, I just want to thank you for your dedication to children, to families, putting yourselves out there and helping to create opportunities for people that may be a little different than we think about, the traditional way. Not that there's anything wrong with that. This is my goal in presenting this to everyone and unschooling with Dr. Riley, is just to say, you know what, you have to find what works best for your children, and then go for it. And so I'd like to end our time together today with a quote from both of you. And this is what you said to sum up microschooling. Microschooling is a unique approach to education designed to increase engagement, motivation, and mental well-being as students work to become the strongest version of their future selves. Ladies, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. And thank you for all the work you do, Kari. Really appreciate it.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks.